Welcome back. So we expand our conversation beyond the frontiers of Nigeria to look at events in Guinea-Bissau. Of course, all of these issues are related. With a sigh of relief, we heave, having heard that President Jonathan got on a special flight along with former president, good luck, Jonathan, got on a special flight along with his delegation yesterday and have left Guinea-Bissau. We're not quite sure if he has arrived back in the nation's capital, but he is safe. You know that former President Jonathan is the leader of the West African Elders Forum, and he's played quite a critical role in election observation missions on the African continent. And so events in Guinea-Bissau, against the backdrop of the president's departures, what is of particular concern at this particular point in time, following the coup amid which the president, the deposed president, had claimed victory. Of course, his main challenger, Fernando Diaz, also claimed victory in that election. And of course, the coup, the military in that country took advantage of the situation. There are reports that the deposed president is now in Senegal, and the Senegalese government is affirming support to work with the ECOAS government to ensure the return of democracy to Guinea-Bissau. So let's look at this holistically now, with the dimensions and the implications for democracy on the African continent, with coups and counter-coups since 2021. And joining us on this segment is Professor Bola Akinterinwa, former Director General of the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs and an international scholar, a scholar on international relations. He joins us virtually this morning. Professor Akinterinwa, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you.
And one of the first few things, that one is compelled to reflect on following events in Guinea-Bissau is the fact that former President Jonathan is a model for democracy of some sorts, having conceded defeat in a major presidential election in Nigeria in 2015. And since then, he's also demonstrated commitment to democracy through his work with election observation missions across the continent. But this example was insufficient to influence the actors of the Guinea-Bissau government and indeed the military force in that country. How does that sit with you? Was it also one of the things that was uppermost in your mind as you reacted to events in Guinea-Bissau?
Certainly not in the uppermost mind. It's not a big deal for me. There is a disconnect between conceding, defeat and allow democracy to prevail on the one hand, and then ensuring that the system itself wants to promote democracy. It is not sufficient to have an individual intention to concede to promote democracy. It is the holistic system, holistic, approach. The people, the system, the polity must be ready to sustain democracy, which has not always been the case. You see, for instance, the African Union, the ECOAS will normally tell you that they both have zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government. When they started with Mali, they took some sanctions against Mali, but the sanctions didn't attain much. They didn't. At the end of the day, everyone condemned the coup. But from there, the next coup took place in Burkina Faso. This time, the tone of the language of the sanctionary measures was stricter. Burkina Faso was condemned. And while they were trying to still manage the impact of the coup in Mali, and Burkina Faso. The third one took place again in Niger, Nigeria's immediate next neighbor, and Nigeria's neighbor with which there had never been any border conflict. Nigeria has the warmest relationship with Niger as a territorial contiguous neighbor. The problem was to the extent that ECOAS now say after Mali, after Burkina Faso, Niger again, perhaps more significantly, ECOAS was under the chairmanship of Nigeria's president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The ECOAS decided to threaten Niger, saying that within 7 days, they must return to power the ousted President Bazoum. This led eventually to the withdrawal of the three countries. They decided to go and form an alliance, Alliance des États du Sahel, Alliance of Sahel states. Now they are no longer members of the ECOWAS. Why is it so? The ECOWAS, the African Union, never bothered to attend to the complaints of the people. And that was why both in Mali, where, for instance, the June 5 movement had to go on the streets to protest. The coup was supported by the people. So was the coup in Burkina Faso and Niger. What was the African Union doing? They couldn't do anything beyond complaining, condemning. Now, when you now come to the same new coup, the coup in Guinea-Bissau, have there not been complaints? Guinea-Bissau, since it got its own independence in 1974 from Portugal, the foundation of Guinea-Bissau in 1974, in other words, a year before the establishment of the Economic Community of West African States in Lagos, the foundation had never been solid. It had always been a foundation of insecurity. The way Portugal left, Guinea-Bissau, did not allow the system, the political system, the polity in Guinea-Bissau to thrive. So it has always been coup upon coup, killing of one another, power struggle, till date. And as a matter of fact, let me remind you, there are 3 levels, not to say 4 levels, of dynamics explaining the recent coup and why, for instance, unconstitutional change of government has become meaningless. First of all, the remote causal factor is basically the 1974 foundation that I've just told you about. But we have accidental causal factors. That is the recidivist, coup making. Guinea-Bissau is on record to have had at least 10 coup d'etats, successful, attempted, unsuccessful, and thereafter. It's coup upon coup. But the issue now is that since the current president that has just been ousted, Mbalo, came to power, he too, as a result, reportedly of the coups, particularly the coup in 2023, what did he do? He decided, to close down the parliament, dissolve the parliament. In fact, he has dissolved the parliament 2 times. 2 times. And in this particular case, when you look at what is happening there, he removed his prime minister. He's taking policy decisions that will enable him to succeed in his sit-tight, administration.
Prof, if I may come in here, if you can hear me, Prof.
I do.
Yeah, fantastic, Prof. Not just hold your line of thought. And in addition to my question, I think I was reading Alexander Thurston's description of coups. He called it the hard rejection, soft acceptance, and hard acceptance. Soft acceptance has to do with what happened with Mugabe. Go, he doesn't want to go, as far as I'm concerned. And everybody knows what removed Mugabe was a clear coup, but there was some kind of a soft acceptance. Now, what has happened in the Sahel that have now left ECOAS is hard rejection until they began to soft pedal to soft rejection, where initially say, no, we don't want coup, restore constitutionality back, and then language began to change to, okay, whatever happens, let's see a transition period. I'm giving all of this background to the effect that we've seen a lot of sit-tight mentality among African leaders. In fact, I call them democratically elected monarchs. Paul Biya is the leader of that pack. We can go on and on. You know all the names. So my question, sir, is, at the AU level, at the ECOWAS level, what kinds of conversations should they be having? Because it feels like these leaders of Africa are deliberately blindsiding themselves. And now we're seeing the results of what is happening. And it's just around our corner.
With due respect, not only to you, with due respect to the African leaders, we are not a very serious people. We are good in making declaratory policy statements, but we never talk and walk the talk. Is it not that, okay, let me put it this way. In 1963, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, provided for non-interference in the domestic affairs of other sovereign states. The word used was interference. They didn't use even intervention. The fundamental difference between interference and intervention is that when you interfere, you don't use force. But when you talk about intervention, you are talking about use of force. And that's why Article 2, Paragraph 7 of the United Nations Charter is very clear on this. It talks about non-intervention. But when the OAU was transformed into the African Union, the act itself went beyond interference. It talked about intervention, saying that the African Union can intervene in the domestic affairs of its member states, especially when there is a case of bad governance, when things are not going well. This is even before the introduction of what is called the IR2P, International Responsibility to Protect. Africa has been on the lead that we should be intervening. But the most unfortunate thing is that in spite of this provision to intervene, African Union, ECOAS, and other, RECs, residential communities, they have not been intervening. Intervening in the sense that when the governments, are not doing well, when the people are complaining, what do? They don't do anything. Now, when you talk about a hard coup, soft coup, you are right. Depending on the criterion you want to use, you can have different coups. For me, I've only distinguished between, unwanted coups and permissible coups. Those are the two coups that we can always be talking about. The unwanted coup falls within what the African Union will be talking about, say they have zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government. They don't want coup. They just want election to be held. But when elections are held and the election is rigged, so what type of election is that? People are complaining. In Guinea-Bissau, for instance, some unconfirmed reports have it that the opposition leader, Da Costa, was actually leading and actually won. And that in this case, because Embalo will not want to hand over power, he decided to organize, a coup that will enable him to stay in power. Even unconfirmed reports even said that Embalo declared openly, he used his mouth to tell the people that when he will be elected, he will deal decisively with the opposition. What he's going to do to them, he said all that. So the opposition capitalized reportedly on all this to say, oh, okay, since they think that they won, the opposition, and you have this agenda to come and victimize them, then they now decided that, look, probably with the sympathy of the military, they organized the coup. What is the role of ECOAS? What is the role of AU when all these happenings were there? So this is the issue. Permissible coups are coups that enjoy the people's support. In Mali, the soldiers, the military capitalized on the sentiments of the people that they were on the streets protesting and protesting and protesting. And when ECOWAS decided to sanction, the Burkinabe leader, as well as the Nigerian leader, what did the people do? They came back to tell the ECOWAS Authority of Affairs of State that, look, they are in support of this, and that their concern was less of the ECOWAS, but of France, the colonial masters. So, where they are now saying they want to restore their sovereignty, and that they want to stop exploitation of their natural resources, they expected the sympathy, the understanding, the support of ECOWAS and the African Union, which was not forthcoming. So,
Prof, do you think that, ECOWAS is in a dicey situation now, following its handling of, the situation in Niger and Chad, that has now seen the exit of those countries where they have now formed an association of the Sahelian states? Do you believe that, ECOWAS is between the devil and the deep blue sea now in how it would approach the condemnation and subsequent action, which people are calling for, of, the coup in Guinea-Bissau this time around?
You cannot be more correct. You cannot be more correct. There is a political lull right now. First, can the ECOWAS have the effrontery to say it is going to use force? It is going to engage in manu militari in order to address the problem. What the ECOWAS can do at best is to continue to harass, saying, look, you must do this, you must do that one. Look, if you have access to the press statement issued by the Tafawa Balewa House in Abuja, I mean Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, compare it with the press statement, the communique issued by the president of the ECOWAS Commission. You will discover that in the press statement of the ECOWAS Commission president, they used a non-aggressive, non-hostile words. It's not more of a threat at all. They are only saying, no, be very sure that no one is killed, no one is hurt. Return to power, democratic power, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the last two paragraphs of Nigeria's own statement, which I would describe as most unfortunate, they use the word warning. Warning. That's what the spokesperson of Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs used in the statement. Go and read it. Warning that Nigeria will hold the coupists accountable. This is a language that is not different from the issuance of threat to Niger, which led Niger and the other two, Burkina Faso and Mali, to say now, although we recognize that ECOAS is a supranational authority, but this time it is thanks to the sovereignty of Niger, thanks to the sovereignty of Mali and Burkina Faso, that power was delegated to the ECOAS to be able to act supranationally. So in this case, I asked the question, can Guinea-Bissau now threaten to withdraw from the ECOWAS? It's a moot question.
All right,
it
Prof.
may be remote.
Yes, all right. Prof, apparently
okay.
what is looking like right now is that the continuous weakness of League of Nations is what we're dealing with, from the UN down to the AU, down to ECOWAS. We're seeing League of Nations just backing and not being able to bite. In fact, failing in diplomacy, poor governance, not being able to be sincere to themselves. A lot of our countries are poorly governed. I'm saying this to bring the last question to you as we begin to wind down, if you can do this in 2 minutes. Should Nigeria be worried? How should we be viewing this as a country?
Nigeria, I should thank our president too, particularly the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Maitama Tuga, for coming up with a new foreign policy objective, which is that of strategic autonomy. They are pursuing a policy of strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy is about self-reliance. Self-reliance in all facets of Nigerian life. At the industrial level, we should be self-reliant. Military capability, we should be self-reliant. It is about capacity building. Nigeria needs to come out, assert herself as really a giant that has to defend African dignity, Black dignity, come to their defense. When we say strategic autonomy, it does not mean that Nigeria will not still follow the principle of interdependence. No, no country is an island on itself. So what Nigeria should be doing now is to strengthen, to mobilize national resources, intellectual resources, media resources, technological resources, to ensure that Nigeria acquires, the capacity to do and undo. When Nigeria has respect, when the dignity is there, if there is a problem in the sub-region and the region, they will listen to Nigeria. When, for instance, there was a coup in Sao Tome by that time, and the leader of Sao Tome came to Nigeria for a meeting under Olusegun Obasanjo. Didn't Olusegun Obasanjo give instruction to say, look, you do this immediately or we do this? And the delegation went with the Sao Tomean Principe president to go back. Within 1 week, the coup was over. If Donald Trump is talking today, it is on the basis of strength. And this is the strength, diplomatic strength that we need. We need to build that one. Nigerian media should continue to remain the most vibrant in Africa. Intellectually, we must be the leader of leaders. I think this is what we should be engaged on. Nigerians should support.
A very apt reminder, your recall of the events of Sao Tome and Principe in the early 2000s is a very apt reminder at this time, amid, the coups and counter-coups happening in the West African sub-region now. We wonder if those days will return, but it's also a fine place to anchor the conversation, and thank you very much. We've been talking with Professor Bola Akinterinwa. He's a former Director General of the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs, and of course, a scholar of international relations. Thank you. I
am currently Professor of International Relations at the Ashivas University of Work. Ondo State.
Indeed. Thank you so much for coming on the program, sir.
All right. Thank you.